seductive medium. There is something about the sheer technical beauty of a wonderfully well airbrushed picture, which is very, very impressive.
Generally, the feeling that most illustrators have towards airbrush illustration is that it's a sort of youthful folly, like mooning or supergluing a toilet seat. We all went through it, but we don't talk about it now. We're beyond that.
The airbrush is a perpetuator of lies. It's a perpetuator of fictions, of euphemisms, moving away from reality as it is and creating a fantasy reality. And indeed, for the most part, a kind of masturbatory fantasy.
The airbrush was first patented 100 years ago by American Charles Burdick, who also, incidentally, invented a machine for folding banknotes. Unfortunately, the status of Burdick's baby has always been ambiguous. It was designed principally for retouching and colouring photographs and other humble graphic tasks, but Burdick himself proudly used it to make real art, including this self-portrait. The airbrush's function may have been fuzzy, but its engineering was precise, spraying a fine, controllable mist of paint without ever obliging the artist to come into contact with his canvas. This hands-off way of working has liberated the airbrush artist from the material world. According to one contemporary practitioner, the airbrush artist lives within the game of his imagination, preoccupied with technique, intrigued by the surface, daydreaming with the media.
It seemed to me that the airbrush was a very good way of putting down a very beautiful, very seductive sort of sheen of colour onto paper. There was something about the lightness and the airiness of it, and the gentleness of it on the paper, which I found very impressive and very attractive.
I became totally obsessed by the technique, and the technique seemed to dominate my own personality. I guess it's rather like a drug, and you get totally addicted to it.
The techniques used by airbrush artists are varied, though never less than meticulous and obsessive. The Swiss artist H.R. Giger works completely freehand, conjuring up the nightmarish fantasies that became the monster from the Alien movies. British artists Alan Aldrich and Harry Willock collaborated on their collections of psychedelic Victoriana, with Aldrich designing and Willock wielding the brush. But the airbrush style we know best, and which advertising agencies favour, involves the use of masks and stencil through which the paint is sprayed.
I'll show you how I do a water droplet, which is the classic airbrush image, the water droplet and chrome reflections. So first, I'll get the pencil. There is a certain amount of voyeurism with airbrush painting. You are, in a way, watching the image appear, seemingly without your control. I get a feeling of a joint ownership of works that I've done between myself and the machine. That's it. And there's the water droplet.
I don't like it very much as a medium anymore. And this is, I'm speaking as somebody who used it and was interested in it for quite a long time, 10 years maybe, including my time as a student. It has the quality, as far as I'm concerned, of making everything look as if it's made out of exactly the same material. Everything looks as if it's made out of the same sort of plastic, from flesh, metal, fruit, vegetables, whatever is drawn, it tends to have this same sort of surface quality.
It's fashionable now to sneer at the airbrush, but in its 100-year history it has won the respect of both fine artists and commercial illustrators. Poster artists like Cassandra and Abram Games valued the airbrush for its matchless ability to lay down carefully graded areas of flat colour. But the airbrush has also provided a succession of maverick fine artists with a radical alternative to the brush. The French situationist Yves Klein used the spray gun and naked women as stencils to create his anthropometry series. But it was Man Ray who first enjoyed the liberating aesthetic of brushless painting.
Before I came to France, I discovered the airbrush. I did a whole series of paintings in 1818 to 19 using the airbrush because it relieved me from painting. I was getting, at that period, to a point where I began to despise painting, like many contemporary artists.
With pop art and the celebration of consumerism, quasi-industrial image making became the big thing. Along with collage, the screen print and billboard painting, the airbrush's time had come. It was the American photorealists of the late 1960s and early 1970s who gave it its big break.
The attempt was to not have elegant or meaningful or powerful art marks, but to build hopefully a beautiful, powerful image out of sort of stupid marks.
The airbrush artist has discovered that there is as much beauty in the surface of an object, or of a person, or of anything, than there is beneath it. It's not an art of personality, it's an art of reception in a way. It is an art that does reject the soul.
But while the crudity of screen printing casts an ironic light on both art and mass production, the airbrush's meticulous deadpan technique makes a fetish out of its subject matter.
The best things about contemporary art is when it doesn't quite 100% succeed. The airbrush is a contradiction to that idea because it's about constant physical success. It's about performance in every sense of that term, and that is why it fails on a longer term basis. That is why it fails in the end to sustain our interest once we've got the brief frisson that says, oh yes, this is technically quite an achievement.
Andy Warhol always said, I want to be a machine. But he never quite did it. He was always held back by the old way of seeing things and the old way of working with images. I think we, the hyperrealist artists, really did become machines. We were just like computers.
Where the airbrush is similar to a lot of other technological inventions is that it allows the artist to go beyond his or her powers, his or her manual powers. So it's removing the hand of the artist and bringing it into something else. We have the same thing today with computer technology, which is proving to take us beyond our abilities. What's interesting about it is it doesn't seem to be taking us beyond our imaginations.
The imagination of the airbrush artist is at its most traditional when dealing with the all-time favourite airbrush subject, women. These days, the woman is quite likely to be a chrome-clad robot, but in all the essentials, the picture will adhere to rules established more than half a century ago by the Esquire pin-up artists Vargas and George Petty. They defined the classic airbrush look, synthesizing the flawless flesh and diaphanous lingerie that helped to win the war. The airbrush had discovered sex, and male fantasies would never be the same again. In the 60s, the prolific and influential airbrush artist Philip Castle reforged the link between the airbrush and the pin-up. As a student at the Royal College of Art, He took the Vargas girls, as interpreted by US air crews, and produced his own synthesis of female and aeronautical forms, the Aero Babe.
It is an homage, I think it's, something I'm taking it back to the original artists, Vargas and Petty, who did the original pin-ups. So it's a connection between aviation and women, I suppose.
The laddish eroticism of so much airbrush work raises the intriguing question: are all men potential airbrush artists?
With this car, the mood I'm after is one of almost pure aggression. Nothing airy-fairy about it. Everything is a solid statement.
It seems now that all airbrush illustration that I see, certainly as somebody who interviews students wanting to be illustrators, it's always produced by young boys. It's never produced by men. Even the technical use of airbrush seems predominantly to be a male stronghold.
The distance between the person making the work and the work itself is inherent in airbrush work. And so there's another sort of layer of maybe logic, maybe coldness, maybe rationality comes in there. And so it attracts, again, a certain type of person.
I think there's a direct correlation between the machine and what the artist produces with that machine. Every good boy wants to control his emission. Every good boy wants to be able to ejaculate on sight with control. And this is what this is about. It is about the male artist asserting himself in his domain.
In the self-censoring 90s, these images are so obviously incorrect that it is easy to forget that not so long ago they were officially funky. In the 70s, the golden age of the airbrush, such imagery became the house style for It's Only Rock and Roll Incorporated, expressing the transatlantic recording ambitions of the stars. In this California of the mind, the cars were sleek, the girls were pneumatic, and everything came in shiny, shiny chrome or deep, deep tan. But the endless party was about to be pooped.
It started to die out in the mid-70s, around the time of early punk and the sort of new wave of illustrators who started to, really reject outright anything that, any of the sort of work that airbrush represented. There's not been, to my knowledge, another person in the RCA who's used it to this day.
So is this the end of the airbrush? Has it become as obsolete as the triple-necked guitar? Or is it a born survivor, just waiting for some young rebel to pick it up and party?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that any medium is going to die out completely. At some point in the future, someone will find one lying around and they'll start making pictures with it and something all magical happen, and the whole thing may start again.